So Edward de Chazal started teaching EFL in 1987 in Izmir, Turkey. Since then, he has specialized in ESP and EAP. In the 1990s, he coordinated ESP programs at Bilkent University in Ankara and set up the English for Specific Academic Purposes military English program for officers at the Joint Command and Staff College in Kuwait. From 2002 to 2011, Edward taught at UCL before working as an independent author, teacher, and trainer. Since 2008, he has also been a visiting lecturer in EAP at the Czech University of Life Sciences and is now EAP subject lead at the University of Bristol Centre for Academic Language and Development. His publications include business English titles for Macmillan and for OUP, the multi-level Oxford EAP course, and the English for Academic Purposes title in the Oxford Handbook for Languages Teachers series. So over to you. Thank you for joining us, Edward. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's great to be here. Thank you so much to all the participants. That's fantastic. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. There we are. So today, as Simon says, I'm going to be focusing on developing students' listening and speaking through EAP materials. There's my title and email there for you. Good to see you all, and I look forward to hearing from you perhaps at the end your thoughts on these materials that we're looking at today in the question phase. So where do we start? Well, maybe I have a bit of an agenda today. I've put up here a focus on academic and professional skills. So I want to argue for both academic and professional. I'm arguing for a development of academic communities. So our students are beginning to be members of academic communities, perhaps novice members. My main thrust is oracy, so an argument for oracy, skills in listening and speaking akin to numeracy and literacy. And we will enable this through roles. Students will work with roles, and I'll explain those later. That leads to the final part of our talk today, student-driven materials and tasks. So to rationalize that, through a focus on both academic and professional contexts, using our expertise, we can facilitate and motivate our EAP students to see themselves as individuals within academic communities in order to develop their oracy, listening and speaking, skills by selecting roles to engage with texts and formulate tasks. So I'm attempting to put these elements together for you today. How we will navigate our talk is we'll start with some principles and practices, move through some listening and speaking events, 7 events, into our roles, 4 roles today, and lastly, tasks and materials. So informing all of this are some principles and practices which I propose today. First, focusing on academic and professional communication skills and genres. So I've talked about this previously, publicly, and my understanding, my conception is that we have our students for perhaps a year, part of a year, and they're in academic institutions for perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4 years of their lives, adult lives, but then they're in their professions for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So the purpose of academic institutions really ultimately is to launch into the professions, and we're at the beginning of that. So we're, through our students, enabling them to engage academically and ultimately professionally. And the good news is there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of motivation to be had by constantly referring not only to academic but also professional contexts. My second principle, be aware of limit testing listening comprehension. So instead, develop our students' oracy, in other words, their listening skills and their speaking skills. So Sheila Thorne, for example, working in the UK, has done a lot of work on development of skills. That's ongoing. So limit testing, develop skills. Also, related to that, develop students' language. So the 3 systems of language: phonology, grammar, vocabulary, within the context of oral texts. Fourth, work both on extensive, so longer tracts of listening, but also intensive. Intensive listening may be extremely intensive, such as working on a 20-second extract very intensively, very deeply, very repeatedly, to drill down, analyze how these words mush up together in English and what our students' problems are. Next up, roles. So I call these 4-color thinking roles: individual, social, linguistic, textual, more of these later. And students operate in their academic communities, and that drives their inquiry, that drives their work. My 6th principle here, hand it over. So develop their initiative, students' initiative, and their responsibility. So they are tasked to select, locate materials, purposes, tasks, outcomes. And one way of doing this, I suggest, is through a journal or portfolio with respect to their listening and speaking. Lastly, not forgetting ourselves, we have massive expertise, linguistic and wider expertise, so we can build on this and really harness it, really use it to impact on our students' oracy skills. More of that later. So those are my 7 principles and practices. A bit of professional input here. This organization called the Skills Builder, it's funded by organizations such as telecoms companies, banks, supermarkets, and they focus on these 8 essential skills which they are aiming to put in our education context, secondary schools and universities. And they're heavily, as you can see, heavily skewed towards listening, speaking, collaboration, teamwork, as you can see on the screen. So huge demand professionally for oracy skills. So this year has been very, very strange. And my big challenge, I think our big challenge as teachers, we're operating more and more in the virtual world. So at Bristol, most of my classes are now online. And I've been asking my students this month, so I've said, how will you build your academic and social communities in your discipline? How are you going to do it? And 7 responses I'm sharing here. They've come up with these: organizing study groups, online networking, groups, discussion boards, apps such as WhatsApp, WeChat, FaceTime, clubs, communities, societies, students' union. So the point of this question is to hand it over to the students. What are they going to do to build their community? We're one step removed from them now that we weren't before. They're not right there in the classroom. They're behind a barrier, behind a piece of technology or multiple technologies. So more than ever, they need to be grouping up, networking together. That's vital. A word on oracy, following on from that. So oracy to speaking is what numeracy is to maths. And secondly, focusing on the employers rating oracy skills. So through our students networking and grouping, they will develop these oracy skills. A little bit more theoretical background. So one of our favorite in-house articles, we talk about meddler in the middle. And if we are going to, as teachers, meddle in the middle, so join students, for example, in their breakout rooms, in their groups, in their learning, above all, we need expertise. We need expertise of the language, linguistic knowledge. So if a student asks a question like, oh, I didn't understand that, I don't know what they're saying, I can't do, whatever their question is, not give a facile response, oh, it'll get better soon. No, give a principled, expert-driven response. So actually, what's the difficulty? It might be something like elision, or an unfamiliar accent, or assimilation. We don't need to blind them with meta language, far from it, but we can explain, point out, ask them to notice, identify such examples of difficulties. So we're rolling up our sleeves, using up our expertise and working with the students to develop their skills. One more note on expertise from John Hattie. That's his biggest factor, according to his years and years of research, in impacting on students' learning. Following on from that, characteristics of online communication today, there's a huge technology interface, barrier perhaps, shifted disrupted conventions. So two students suddenly speak at once, or we speak at once because we can't see the cues, we can't see the people behind the screen, we can't pick that up. So we have to relearn, recast convention here. However, there are vast new opportunities. So technology affords us global reach. So actually our boundaries are not limited to our classroom wall, our little class. They are global. We can build on that. So 7 academic listening speaking events. This is adapted from my handbook, chapters 8 and 9. I'll run through these fairly quickly and pick out 3 opportunities in each one for listening, color-coded pink, speaking, green. So our flagship is probably the lecture or the talk, old as the hills, hundreds of years old. Lecturer does most of the talking, students do most of the listening. Pretty transactional, occasionally interactive, just depending on the context, lots of multi-skilling, limited opportunities for speaking. The opportunities may be more walking into the room, walking out of the room, if it's a real life room, than the actual inside the room during the talk. Second of our 7 events, presentations. Students in doing these have a huge opportunity. So the delivery is usually highly rehearsed, 2-phased, the question phase being more interactive, and we have perhaps a more egalitarian status. So the presenter and the audience are often the same people, whether it's at an academic conference or a student class event where all the people in the audience actually also present. So there's a nice sense of equality there. Plenty of opportunities for listening and speaking. Third, seminar, again, a flagship event. These are becoming online now. I'm noticing when I go into the breakout rooms on Blackboard Collaborate, which is the platform we're using, there's a huge amount of variation, but the students are often quite animated, I've noticed. So they're beginning to build these relationships, beginning to be part of these academic communities. So they're responding, they're building on each other's contribution. By walking in, I know that I change the dynamic. I can adopt the role of meddler, but I don't want to meddle too much because I want them to be building their community, their interactive, collaborative community. Fourth, tutorial. So students in tutorials, when they have them, not all settings have them, may need to respond through speaking. The student is a kind of a junior partner in this relationship, typically hierarchically. And these events link in and connect to others like lectures and seminars. So there's a lot of oracy going on through them. Fifth, group meetings. So the initiator is the student. They are asking for something. This could be written, it could be via email, it could be in real life, or it could be via a Teams event, Microsoft Teams or some other platform, to engage with their tutor or lecturer, seeking clarification, seeking advice. So if you have opportunities there, we can maximize those for speaking, authentic speaking. Project work, fantastic opportunity. So it's collaborative, lots of communication, negotiation, ideally problem solving, oracy again taking place. And my seventh, I've changed it since my book in the light of recent development. So networks and academic communities, this would be my flagship opportunity today. So students, my students in my class, I've emphasized that they may feel that as 17-year-olds, they're bottom of the hierarchy. I say, no, you know a vast amount. You've got your language, cultural, disciplinary knowledge. You're bringing that into this space. That's fantastic. We've got a real sharing of those. We've got multiple L1s in some cases. And I'm encouraging them to lead, collaborate again, negotiate again, and build these communities and build them across classes so they're maximizing their listening and speaking. A practical tip here is to develop a diary. So here's an example. I've used this event as an example. So it's today, this time, this location, online, of course. You can individually pick out the role, which we're going to come to in a minute, and the language. I've thrown in a few examples. You might think, ooh, oracy, I'll put that down. And then what's your plan? Well, I've suggested, because I've put my roles on my website, Jurassic Academic, I live on the Jurassic Coast, and that could be an action plan. So in the role of student as learner, you can fill this out today. This is a sample here. So this brings us to our roles, 4 roles today. In my study is my printer, and you can see the 3 colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, so blue, red, yellow, not forgetting black. So these 4 colors combine to make up any color, any image, anything, just 4 colors. So akin to that image, I just painted it on a canvas here, the 4 colors. You'll notice that each color is contiguous to the other 3. It touches the other 3 because they're mutually informing. And these colors represent the 4 roles. So we've got red represented as social, yellow individual, blue linguistic, black textual. So the 4 roles that the students adopt, they can adopt one at a time, inform their purpose in engaging with a text. They can adopt an individual role, linguistic, social, or textual. They all inform each other, and they're likely to bleed into each other. They're not black and white. So let's start with the individual. What is this? So keywords here, it's about influencing, initiating, persuading, and responsibility. So through persuasion, the individual notices and engages in people-driven persuasive academic genres, such as poster presentations, seminar contributions. And as an individual, they position themselves at the heart of spoken and written texts, and that's appropriate. Argument is individually driven, stance driven, subjective. So a little bit more detail on the individual. I've picked out 3 or 4 purposes or activities. I've put more on my website, by the way. I've just added it this morning. So if you look for 4 color thinking roles on Jurassic Academic. So the purpose, so what actually is my purpose? Am I persuading someone, critiquing, developing knowledge, developing skills, developing language? Am I finding material? Am I being assessed, being entertained? Am I interacting socially or academically or professionally? What are my purposes? What am I doing with this text? So a purpose is not because the teacher told me to do it. It's because I've come up, me as the student, I've come up with a purpose. And then from that individual's position, we can engage. What about the author's stance? What about their position? What's my response to that? How do I fit in? How can I evaluate my learning, reflect on my learning? What am I going to do next? Where will I find that opportunity? These kinds of questions. Next up, social role. So keywords: professional, academic, publicizing, and collaborating. This is all about the people, okay? The people behind the text. Here's a text. you may see some words on a page, but actually it's people driven. There's people behind it. All texts are created by people. So look at the people. Who are they? Who's delivering the texts? What about their work? Where are they based? What's their authority? What's their relationships with other people in the field? What are their stances? Am I connected to them? And also through publicizing, through making public our work. So our students actually like to do that. So they may share through their blogs, posts, social media, whatever their outlets are, their work. So that's social. So I've put 3 extracts here. So style, look at the style of communication. Look at the paralinguistic features, facial expressions, eyebrows, tone of voice, emotion, affect, anger, other emotional features that can be picked up. Also language choices. Why are certain words chosen or phrases chosen? So who are those people? Who are those people behind the text? Who are they? What motivates them? Also look at what those people include and exclude in their text. So we've got a core of the text, core coverage. So what's outside that? What are the limitations? So it's all about the people and their choices. Third up, textual. Keywords, genre, audience, purpose, regenering, organization. So Hilary Nessie yesterday talked about genre. So we've got learn to deal with the unencountered and unusual genres. There's new genres, unknown to us genres, and there always will be. So how can we deal with them? How can we unpack them, engage with them? How can we analyze the structure of those genres? New spoken genres, hybrid spoken written genres. And a lot of re-genre is going on. So a summary classically can turn into a review, objective to subjective, or essay into presentation, article into blog, and so on and so forth, without limit. Here's a few related questions. So what's the topic? Orient yourself from the student's perspective to that topic and that focus. Notice how they're developed. Where's the evidence? Where's the support, the citation, the examples, the anecdote, the emotion? What are the main points? Work them out, summarize them, be able to reprocess them orally, great skills. And how's the text organized and why is that? And what's your response to that? Okay, so it's the text, its organization, people behind the text, and lastly, of course, language of the text. So linguistic, key points, academic, language, analyze, and meaning. So work on analyzing the language which expresses specific meanings, such as causality, location, process, evaluation. And the second one I'm doing with my students right now, they're developing their glossaries. They're picking out technical and other words in texts that we are using, and they're building their glossaries. They're searching for definitions and comparing and evaluating definitions. And they do that mostly without me. I've set it up and they communicate amongst themselves, inside and outside the classroom. So students as analyzers. Getting hard to read here and make you work hard for your money. So look at the phonology of the text. So listen for the phonological patterns, features, but also written texts have an underlying phonology. There's people behind them. There is a phonology. It's kind of hidden and it's there to be unpacked. Vocabulary, of course, keywords, but the students select them. The students identify them. We don't tell them, they select them. It's their agenda. How are they pronounced? How are they linked? Bring them off the page. Use apps to help you, like dictionaries that pronounce the words. And also look at the voice, look at the author and their voice. How is that expressed? What's their choices of language? How do they report things? Why? How? So this brings us to materials and tasks. I've got a kind of blueprint for listening. I'm not showing specific samples of materials. I've written quite a lot of them. They're published around the place, for example, Oxford EAP, but these are a kind of blueprint that can be adapted. So this is student facing. First, source the text. Adopt a role. Work with other students with different roles. So these are old ideas. They've been around for a long time. I've worked with these roles for many years, since I worked in Turkey, for example, and they come out in all sorts of iterations. For example, there's Kirsten Okubo and Tyson Seaburn in Canada working with listening and reading circles, respectively. And there's quite a lot out there with working with roles, fascinating stuff, very collaborative, very generative. Establish your purposes for listening. So that's over to the students. Why? What are you doing? What are you aiming to get out of this? So listen to achieve that purpose. Listen again to capture the content, get that noted down in some way. Listen again to identify, drill down on that language. So work on language repetitively, discreetly, in context, in short bursts. And then constantly relate that content to you, your content, your context, critique it, respond to it, personalize it, own it, develop it, reject it, extend it, and then share it, publicize it, reprocess it, regenre it. I've got 5 brief examples now of activities that are fairly generic and highly generative of oracy, listening and speaking. So first, work in groups of 2 or more, analyze a topic, choose the topic or a proposition or an idea or an issue or an object from multiple perspectives like economic, ethical, financial, geographical, cultural, ethnographic. This will develop oracy through criticality, through critical thinking. It will lead to develop individual and group originality, new ideas, making new connections across existing pieces of material. It will underline the connectedness of ideas, how all disciplines can be related. And that is off the page because it's in groups. Second, speak for 2 minutes on a topic you're passionate about. I love this one. Get me onto Dorset and the Jurassic Coast. You won't be able to stop me. I've had my Chinese student recently. He talked about fish. He kept fish in a huge collection of aquariums in his dwelling in China. I mean, that was fascinating. The confidence, the passion he had, and his fluency developed. I valued his knowledge, and then I could relate any topic going forward back to fish. It was a very memorable presentation for the whole of the pre-sessional. Build on what you know. Third up, present new information on a topic by extending your knowledge. So choose the topic that you want or need to know more about. Search for multiple texts, including listening texts on that topic. Find new information. So that will extend, build the knowledge. It can be collaborative. New techniques to extend speaking skills, builds confidence. What they know is valid, always respect that. Fourth, practicing a long group poster presentation. These are fantastic events. Students can collaborate again, so they work in groups of 3 or 4, turn it into a little institution event or even a public event if possible one day. And then we can work on assessment criteria. I've put a reference there for the content and the delivery if you wish. So you've got research skills as well as oracy skills going on. Peer feedback, group learning, focusing on one aspect at a time. And lastly, a knowledge exchange event. So you build, curate, and develop an event to share knowledge on a topic that you agree on in your group, in your class, in your community. So it fosters academic community, develops oracy, encourages team working. Okay, well, this brings us all good things that come to an end. I hope you like my photos today. I like going for walks and I see these rocks and photograph them. My conclusions are, let's use our expertise, our love of the language, our passion for our students' academic and professional development. 2, develop, foster their academic communities, which may be lifelong, academic going into professional communities, where they are tasked and motivated to produce work, select texts, locate sources, identify purposes, identify language, analyze language, ask for help, collaborate, share, publicize, drill down, build up portfolios, build diaries, take responsibility, and we can really step back. The work that is going on is over to our students. Okay, so I think now we have a question phase.
Yep, great. Thank you very much, Edward. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, lots of comments and clap, clap, clap coming in, as I can see there. Let's just go through as many as we can. So let's kick off with, actually, could you put up or tell me what your web page was you mentioned? Was it the Jurassic one? Many people were asking.
Oh, okay. Yes, if I share my screen, how do I do that? I will just go back. I think I had it open. Yeah, I need to share my screen again, don't I?
Or just read it out and then we can.
Okay, so it's www.jurassicacademic.com.
Jurassicacademic.com. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so first question about correction. So how do you give correction to students without making them feel embarrassed?
I'd start with the student, actually. So what do they want corrected and why? So if it's an unrealistic aim, for example, to correct everything all the time in real time, if we believe that to be unrealistic or undesirable, then we can have a discussion there and then and come to some kind of agreement. For some students, accuracy is extremely highly valued, sometimes more than teachers may value it. So if they want that, then I think we should work towards that. So it's their agenda, but within practical and realistic limits.
Thank you. There's 2 questions related sort of to motivation here, but also lack of vocabulary. How do you motivate students with a lack of vocabulary? And similarly, students who have a basics but can't really speak, any strategies to overcome this?
Okay, so vocabulary first. I think this is back to our expertise. The fact is that there are thousands of words in English, and to use a few yardsticks, I would give a quantitative response. For example, Michael Rundle's evidence, he's the founder of the Macmillan dictionaries and worked on COBIL. So through his corpus work, 100 words like the and is make up 45% of texts. So if we start that with that as a basic fact, so 45% quantitatively of texts are the top 100 words. This is a graph that goes like that, levels off. So the top 3,000 words will give 85%, and then 7,500 words will give 92%. So there's quite a mountain to climb. Really, a target is 7,500 words to get 92% coverage, which will enable you to read reasonably fluently, so you're not bogged down by all the unknown words. Slice it up, make it realistic. So how many words do you now know? Well, you might know 1,500, so you've got 6,000 to learn. 100 a week, that's quite a lot for a year. Let's say 2 years, more realistic. So we look at the quantities, look at the research, and work out a plan. Is it realistic in 6 months? No. Will it take 2 years? Probably. It could take a year. Students can do that in a year if they're really motivated. I've had students that do that.
Excellent, thank you. So a question from Sarah. Could you please share tips on how to stimulate the students during an online discussion to speak more independently without memorizing everything and reading from their notes?
Thank you, Sarah. So memorizing is a challenge. My response is to disrupt, interrupt, challenge, because that's what happens in the actual real world out there. So if someone is coming out with a memorized spiel, the audience's instinct is to pull them up on it. So let's do that. So in a presentation, say, excuse me, you've just mentioned this, what about, and then ask an intelligent but fair question based on what they've just said. So they're forced to come off script, and get the students, above all, getting the students to do that with each other.
Sure. A question here, I've seen two very similar ones actually. How can we, this is from Paula, how can we create a dialogue exercise or conversation exercise between two students if you don't have the option of a breakout room? And there was a similar one, you know, if you've got a large class of 100 students and there's no time to go around everyone, perhaps without breakout rooms, how do you monitor, how do you deal with?
So is that online?
Yes, sorry, yes, it would be online.
Are they all in one room then?
I think they're all coming to the class as, say, quite a lot of students, that there isn't an opportunity to sort of do pair work, you know, breakout rooms, but you want them to speak. So how do you set that up? How do you organize that? Have you done anything?
I can't imagine a technological solution if there isn't a breakout room. I would shift it into the non-class time. So say, right, put two people that it's reasonable to put together and give them a little task, but they will do that outside the classroom time.
Yeah.
So they have to collaborate using another app in their own time and come back to you. So that collaboration will take place kind of off stage, as it were.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the only option. Is something on assessing? Any tips on how to assess and give feedback on students or work?
Again, I would relate that to their purpose. So assessment is crucial. So if we track assessments such as acquisition of new language, new words, then that becomes evidenced. The feedback needs to be based on some criteria. I think student input again would be useful. So what actually do you want me to assess you on and why? Is it a proficiency kind of assessment, like an IELTS type assessment, or is it something more personal?
Okay, another question here from Jessica. Most of my EAP students, usually PhD students, are watching American British TV series and their level of comprehension is increasing in leaps and bounds. What do I need to do to increase that academic English?
Okay, shift the genres. They can move into kind of soft academic like TED Talks, or there's a whole wealth on, for example, BBC have documentaries. They can be fantastic by obviously experts in the field. It could be David Attenborough talking about nature, but it could be some scientist talking about some phenomenon like communication. And like Al-Khalili, I was watching one the other day that a colleague advised me of, fascinating, the origins of language, different cultures, language and communication. So if the topic is interesting and it's treated in an academic way, even though it's a public-facing genre, it's evidence-based, research-based, then that would be a nice, gentle way into the more hardcore academic lectures that are available on university websites like Yale, Oxford, all over the place.
I think that ties in.
Yeah, Bristol have 3-minute theses. They're nice. So a PhD student stands up and delivers the essence of their thesis in 3 minutes. Nice.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, quite a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Can be done.
Yeah, I think there's a very similar question there. How do you motivate students online to improve their listening and speaking during the COVID-19 crisis?
So motivating, this comes up a lot. When I worked in Turkey, it was always there. You know, how do we motivate our students? For me, because I'm telling you to approach doesn't work. Because I'm your teacher, you have to, doesn't really work. Assessments are sort of pretty much detested, but you have to live with them. So it's moved beyond all that, as I've said, to actually the world. Do you want to engage in the world out there? Do you ever want to interact through, for example, business, trade, commerce, tourism, sport, culture at all beyond your L1 boundaries? If so, then that's your motivation, that's your key in, because there's a whole world of 7 billion people out there. Fantastic world. We're more and more connected. So find whatever it is that floats your boat whether it's keeping fish, photography, whatever, sport, obviously, or anything whatsoever, it doesn't matter. And then you can start connecting, being motivated.
Excellent. I think we've probably got time for one more. Yeah, probably quite a common question. Somebody here says that most of my students can speak quite fluently, but they don't really sound English. They have a problem with collocation. Any suggestions for that?
It depends on your input. So I've had teachers actually that were there. They were Slavic language speakers and they'd never been to the UK. They spoke what I would call BBC English because that was their input. So amazingly rich, quite formal, quite RP-like, received pronunciation-like. So if you want to sound a little bit more like a target community, whatever that might be, British or whatever, then get some material from that community, some listening, speaking output, start connecting with that community.
Yeah, I think it might come back to the films as well. That's always a good place.
Films, yeah, if that's what you want to do, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for. I'd really like to thank you, Edward, for
It's
that
been
talk.
a pleasure. I want to thank everyone out there for
that's good. Yeah, we had a high volume of traffic, so to speak, today. Lots of participants, so that's awesome. Thank you very much for everybody who attended today.